Good evening. My name is Ernecl. My guest tonight is Dr. E. Michael Jones, a gooder as I call him. Thanks, Dr. Jones, for accepting my invitation. It's been a while.
Yes, you're welcome. Good to be here.
Thank you. Um, Twitter Twitter has got a new CEO, a new Leiter uh, in Deutsche Wörter, uh, and he's an Indian. And before we started this stream, I said we could discuss of whether this Indian is of a kind that is better or worse than the kind of an Indian Dinesh D'Souza is. Would have been better for free speech and for us a more free spirited and free thinking people if a new CEO of Twitter would have been Dinesh D'Souza and not this Indian.
Well, we don't know I don't know anything personal about this Indian, but I know the Indians were hired by big corporations throughout the United States because they were cheap labor. And I know people have had experience working with them, and they basically are there to do what they're told. That's the difference between the Indian workforce and the American workforce, or the American workforce as it was. So if you go to India, you'll find that it's the cheap labor capital of the world, or it aspires to be the cheap labor capital of the world. That's a race to the bottom. But you'll find that there are women there who have bowls of dirt on their head. They will walk from a pile of a hole in the ground, and they'll dump the dirt and walk over, and they do this all day. So they haven't discovered the wheelbarrow yet in India, but these people are from the high tech sector of the economy. There are a lot of outsourcing being done in Bangalore. It's one of the big centers of high tech in India. And the result is you're bringing people who have none of the experience of growing up in America, for example, with none of the culture of America, the little that we have, the idea of being an independent agent. It's all alien to these people. For the most part, there are exceptions, of course, but the problem is these people are now taking over from the generation of Jack Dorsey. Jack Dorsey was a Catholic from St. Louis who created Twitter. It got very successful, and he became a kind of guru. He grew a long beard, and now he's disappeared. So it's not a good sign. There was always this willingness to do the bidding of the oligarchs early on, even when Jack Dorsey was there. And now it looks as if it's going to be even worse, because I think this man who just became the CEO was previously head of the enforcement arm at Twitter, which meant punishing inappropriate speech. So it only looks as if it's going to get worse now.
But what kind of mentality is it of these oligarchs that would rather have no discussions at all, or quasi discussions, than to have this free spirited global country of grown men discussing, debating, dialoguing with each other? Why would they want such a world where there wouldn't be for any grown man able to be their opponent, their verbal or intellectual opponents?
Well, I think they become they have the CEO mentality, which is basically they are the founder and they are the CEO, and these are in many ways two conflicting job descriptions. The founder is a guy who has a vision. Suddenly, the guy with the vision realizes his product really took off. He made a lot of money. And then as soon as you make a lot of money, you attract the attention of the thought control people who are working for the oligarchs. And they make it clear that these are the terms upon which you have to succeed. And so therefore, at that point, you have to make a decision. Do I continue with my vision and then have to fight these people? Or do I cash out like a CEO, get with my golden parachute? And I think that the temptation to cash out is very pervasive. So another guy, the guy who basically took over after Twitter went in this direction, became an enforcement arm of the oligarchic speech, was Andrew Torba, who created Gab. And Gab immediately came under fire because Andrew Torba started to offer some type of resistance. The culmination of this came about a year ago when Mother Jones, which used to be a left-wing magazine, did an expose of Andrew Torba based on hacked emails. Now, first of all, why is this legitimate? This is not legitimate journalism. This is theft. But anyway, so at this point, we read the Mother Jones article, and I'm reading down here, and I'm thinking, well, what's the big deal here? The emails don't sound that incriminating. And then suddenly, the smoking gun. We find the smoking gun. The smoking gun is the fact that Andrew Torba, in a conversation with Roosh V, the former pickup artist, said, "Yeah, I know E. Michael Jones." And Roosh said, "Yeah, he helped me break a bad habit." And Andrew Torba said, "Yeah, I agree with you." Something like that. In other words, I'm the smoking gun. This is the whole point of it, is that you talk to me. He talked about me in a positive way, which was a thought crime. And that, as a result, he should be banned. Well, Andrew Torba took the opposite tack that Jack Dorsey took. When the story came out, Andrew Torba doubled down and said, "Yeah, I said that, and there's no reason why I shouldn't say that. And we believe in free speech, and therefore Jones will always have a platform here." Well, that was the wrong thing to say. He shouldn't have said that. So the next day, the attack intensified, and the governor of Texas, who had a week before had announced that anyone who was deplatformed was welcome in Texas, suddenly gives a press conference and says, "Gab is not welcome in Texas." Wait a minute, what's going on here? You got the right-wing governor of Texas, you got the left-wing magazine Mother Jones. What's the common denominator? Well, look behind the governor of Texas when he said this. It's the Israeli flag. That's the whole point here. That's exactly what happened, and that's what, that's the story here. It's that simple.
Yeah, here's a comment. Dorsey got ousted by a by a German investor activist, Zinga, who became to be the majority shareholder of Twitter. Keith Woods made a good video on it. Yeah, I think I saw it.
Yeah, Singer's a vulture capitalist who was a big supporter of Donald Trump, and he's one of the three men responsible for Trump overturning the Iran nuclear agreement. So he uses money to buy up these operations, and then he uses the leverage when he gets the shares to basically dictate policy. So we're back at the same story here. This may get you banned again from Twitter, but you've got this Jewish control of the narrative, and everybody's struggling against it. And it sort of hangs in the balance right now. I can tell you another story that's relevant. It's like breaking news, just happened yesterday, the day before. The HBO Max just brought out a new series. It's called Santa Incorporated, and it's a stop action cartoon based on Santa and the elf. The elf is voiced by Sarah Silverman, and Santa is voiced by Seth Rogen. And it's supposed to be funny, but basically what it is getting Santa. See how many times you can get Santa to say fuck. Or how many times can you get that elf to say fuck? And that's Jewish humor. And so they put up the trailer on YouTube, and immediately the trailer gets 25,000 dislikes. Okay? At this point, YouTube cuts the dislike button. No more dislikes. You're not allowed to dislike this anymore. And then the comments start. and all the comments are talking about how, the elves were kicked off of 109 shelves. And every time they get kicked off, they engage in elfocentrism. And so this hilarious meme started coming out, basically undermining the whole. In other words, what is the comments? 25,000 comments or something along these lines. And everyone is saying basically, these Jews are ridiculing Christmas. And we're not allowed to object. If we object to this Jewish mockery of Christmas, we are bad people. What I'm saying here is this control, they have absolute control, but they can only come up with things that antagonize people and make the situation worse. And that's precisely what happened with Santa Inc.
Yeah, I have to tell you an anecdote. I went to work and I always come 1 hour too early because I can't calculate how far I have to drive to work, and I wrote I retweeted Seth Rogen's tweet. Seth Rogen tweeted, "We sure pissed off many white supremacists with our Santa Inc." And I retweeted and wrote a tweet. Seth, we sure pissed off whites, and then also Seth, you are against us if you claim we pissed off whites, and I got banned from Twitter. I got cancelled. It could be coincidence, but immediately afterwards, I got locked out of my Twitter account, and that was it. I haven't been able to. Yeah.
Right. So if you object to Jewish cultural subversion of Christmas, for example, or Jewish transgressive behavior, like having Santa say those words all the time, you're a bad person. And so it's time that I think it's time that we formulated the fundamental principle of Jewish psychology here. And it turns out that it's been captured by a Polish proverb. So the Polish proverb is basically, the Jew cries out in pain as he strikes you. The Jew cries out in pain as he strikes you. I think that's what's going on here. They attack everything. They attack what you believe, and then they blame you for not liking their attack on what you believe. This is the situation we're in. But the problem here is it's not working anymore. The reception, the overwhelming negative reception of Santa Inc. Is just proving that they can have all the money in the world, they can have all the control of the media in the world, but the message they're putting out is so obnoxious and so self-refuting that it's bringing about the exact opposite of what they intend. That's the situation we're in right now.
Yeah, I've noticed they even managed to achieve to reach towards neo-pagans who are basically against Christianity as a part of European identity, and even they started to be critical towards Jews because of their meaningless, absurd critiques or their relationship towards Christianity.
It's moral reversal. In other words, they accuse you of what they do. So there's another recent example is Mr. Borla. Mr. Borla is the head of Pfizer, which is the pharmaceutical company that is manufacturing the vaccine. Mr. Borla gives us a speech in which he announces that anyone who disagrees with his vaccine is a criminal. Well, now, wait a minute. That's pretty strong statement. What's he saying here? Well, look down at the com box underneath his comment. Everyone says, no, you're the criminal. You're the criminal. So the Jew Borla, he cries out in pain as he poisons you with his vaccine. He's the criminal. He's reversing what this is the moral reversal that is the fundamental basis of Jewish psychology. Accuse the victim of being the perpetrator.
How's the situation been now in the States? In Slovenia, we have this funny situation where we have this so-called mainstream right wing, even semi-Christian a party that is in charge of our government right now, and their fans that are brutally basically promoters of vaccines, which is even against um, their lords, which are American mainstream right wingers, which are at least moderately against vaccines, if I observe this accurately. What description of current situation in the states in relationship towards vaccines?
Well, the main representative, the main enforcer of vaccines is President Joe Biden, which means that the Republicans are automatically going to be against him. There's also the aura of illegitimacy behind his election. He's also bungled many different things, including the evacuation out of Afghanistan. He's just struggling along. This is from a position of weakness. He's now trying to assert some type of position of strength by mandating the vaccine. As soon as he did that, there was a kind of reaction. Natural reaction from the Republicans, but it's also a regional reaction because the states now are becoming very important because they can resist the federal mandate. So 21 states filed suit in court against the federal mandate, and the court sided with those 21 states, and so it got postponed. It didn't get enforced. The second thing is that there was the Occupational Safety and Hazardous group that talks about that sets the rules for the workplace. Biden tries to use the OSHA as a way of imposing the mandate. The courts overturned that as well. So he's had two big setbacks, and this has energized the regional opposition to COVID. So it's going to break down into basically two different Americas. I think this is inevitable, and it's the one decision that is looming, which will probably codify this resurrection of state rights, is the abortion decision, which is coming out of the state of Mississippi. I think the Supreme Court is going to uphold the Mississippi law, which said basically that they can restrict abortion. At that point, 21 other states will immediately put those type of laws into action, and you will have, in effect, the de facto end of basically this unified American culture, or the great achievement of television after World War II was the solidification of federal power over the entire country. They've gone too far with abortion. They should have never done that. That was a Jewish initiative from New York City. Bernard Nathanson said that. He was one of the main promoters of abortion. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one of the main proponent of that idea on the Supreme Court. She's dead, and that idea died with her. And so now it's going to go back to states' rights, and I think that's what we're going to see is states' rights will now become the new norm in America. So if you want to go have an abortion, go to New York, go to California, but you're not going to get one in Mississippi or Indiana or places like that. There will be states that will basically make it illegal. That's going to be the new normal, and it's going to have an effect also on COVID implementation, and COVID implementation is simply another form of oligarchic control. So I think what you're seeing in the United States is local reaction to oligarchic control.
They're making this in Slovenia. They're making this, in my opinion, perverse distinction between mandatory and enforced. They're saying mandatory is not the same as enforced. You're just you just won't be able to eat anymore or
All right,
drink
well,
any.
you're perfectly free to resist. You'll just starve to death because you're not allowed to buy food. That's all. It's your choice. One guy said, "Sure, you can die. That's your choice." Well, great, thank you. I'm glad we have a choice in this matter. This is preposterous. This is just word games. This is playing semantic games. It's enforcing. The question is, do the politicians in Slovenia represent the Slovenian people, or are they proconsuls of the oligarchs whose job is to enforce the oligarchic rules upon subject peoples and the Slovenian people being subjects to the oligarchs? Which is it? Which is it?
Well, it's obvious that they're representatives of this globalist enforcers of vaccines. It's what's really perverted about it is that they were for 30 years this party of called SDS from our current prime minister Yanis Janša. They presented themselves as patriots, even mellow nationalists and so forth. They were the party of the Slovene people and so forth. Um, but in the last at least 2 years, they uh, they sure showed their real faces. They are the puppets of the elves.
So is Slovenia a vassal state to Germany, a vassal state to Austria? How does this work? How because you're a member of the European Union. What does that mean?
Slovenia has been for years, decades, maybe even centuries of vessels. Okay, it's more accurately to say at least for 50 years it's been some sort of a vassal state of Austria and Germany and so forth, because even in Yugoslavia you had many Slovene workers going to work as gastarbeiters in Germany and Austria. But after 91, of course, Slovenia was and has been economically a vassal state of Germany. We have a tiny little part of our sovereign economy. The majority of it is dependent on German economy, and as speaking about the vaccines and the whole situation about the vaccines, we are total vassal state of Germany and Austria. Slovenes often say, look the way it is in Germany and Austria. The Germans and Austrians have always been some sort of idols of Slovenes as in countries where righteousness rules and so forth. And
All right,
yeah,
there's a certain element here. It's like I got into trouble once talking about Bosnia Herzegovina. I said Bosnia Herzegovina is not it's not a state. It's too small to be a state. It can't have any real independence. Okay, so we're going to have to accept the fact. Okay, Slovenia is a small country. Okay, but what was its status? Let's say under the Austro-Hungarian Empire. What was their status then?
yeah, you said it good about the Bosnia, and the same, and it is in my opinion the same with Slovenia. That's why, for example, in 1918, where till 1918 Slovenia was an Austro-Hungarian empire, and then it stepped out and went into some sort of state of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes that later became Yugoslavia. And the alternative was never independent, sovereign Slovenia as it seems to be today. And it even today isn't sovereign. It's far from being
Right.
sovereign. It was always be between being a part of German Slavic Middle Europe monarchy or state, or going down the the rabbit hole or becoming a shit hole together with Croats and Serbs. It was always only these two alternatives for Slovenes. Although some people say that if we stayed in this space with German culture, that we nowadays that we wouldn't speak Slovene anymore. But it is a lie. In Austro-Hungary, every single part of Austro-Hungary had its own language, and they could speak it.
Right. The fact that you had they called it the Austro-Hungarian Empire was obvious. It was obvious that if you spoke Hungarian, you were not part of the German language sphere. Obviously not. No. I think that because it was a Catholic monarchy, the Austro-Hungarian Empire understood subsidiarity in a way that the European Union doesn't. It should have. It should be a principle. It should be a principle in the United States of America as well. If there was a difference between Virginia and Massachusetts at the founding of this country. Virginia was the Cavaliers; they were Anglicans. The Massachusetts were the descendants of the Puritans, who were the regicides, and so they could never resolve that issue. Even though they're all Englishmen, they all spoke English. They were all Protestants in some sense or other. They knew that they were so different. So let's just let them be separate, and we'll try and have unity in multiplicity, which is a noble principle. It's the principle of aesthetics. And they tried it. And once America embarked upon the road of empire, which certainly happened after World War II, that whole idea went down the drain. And so you had to have, after you drafted 11 million men in fighting the war in Europe, everyone had to have this uniform culture imposed on them. All I'm saying is it's breaking down. It's not going to last. They're going to have to go back to the original principle. The same thing will have to happen eventually with the European Union, because it's one thing to say you're a vassal state of Germany, but Germany is a vassal state of the United States of America. So you're the vassal of a vassal. Yeah. That's not going to work out. That's not the worst situation. And I know this fairly well because I lived in Germany. I speak German. Is the situation that the American social engineering created in Germany after World War II. And we are still living in the aftermath of that creation. Because the fundamental myth of the American empire is the Holocaust. And that myth has had devastating effect on America. It has led to the Jewish hegemony over our culture. And even worse than that, it has led to Jewish hegemony over the Catholic Church, which is something that we could probably talk about as well here.
Yeah. And it's probably even worse in this Germanic area, because I think
once you understand the central myth of the American empire, obviously the worst place in the world is going to be Germany. It's the worst place in the world, because that is the place where the people have internalized the commands of their oppressors because of social engineering.
Yeah, they lock up grandmas there because they doubt the central myth of our civilization. Last week I started work, and some coworker in Austria asked me, "Okay, what did you do before?" And I said, "Hey, yeah, I worked for many years as a journalist. I'm a philosopher." And he asked me what kind of a journalist I was, and a couple of days ago I explained him the whole situation, why I got banned, and why I got cancelled and so forth. And he just couldn't understand why I would hold such thoughts. I told him that I think the Austrians have a right to be against me as a Slovene coming into their country as an immigrant worker. I'm not saying that I would like for them to have these beliefs or to enforce that, but I'm just saying they have the right to say they don't want Slovenes as the immigrants there. But they just can't understand this at all. This is too subtle for them. They're just thinking in this vague globalistic terms, and this is the only language these people, the common folk, understand. Although some are at least against vaccines, that is a good part.
Yeah, I saw demonstrations in Vienna. I don't know whether they're going to do it. I also saw pictures of police going through department stores in Vienna. Your papers, please. It's like right out of a Nazi movie here. The soldiers are now asking for your papers. I also saw a sign, the Jewish Star of David, the yellow patch, and instead of Judah in there, it has unvaccinated in there. So this, what we're seeing is the irony here of Germany imposing on its own people the very regime that they claim that they're against. This is stunning how the blindness of these people. So Angela Merkel, in her farewell address, said we have to fight against hate. What are you talking about, Angela? What do you mean by hate? First of all, why did she say this? Well, because she's a puppet of the people who think that hate speech is something that they don't like. Anything they don't like is called hate speech, and she's their puppet. And this is the regime that's now enforced in Germany, and they are going to enforce that on everybody in the European Union.
Probably. Um, from the point of view of Slovene who knows how dependent Slovenia is from Germany, I'm appalled of the fact that we haven't had this kind of law yet that would lock us up for saying something against the Jews. But it's coming. But it's coming. At least I wasn't locked up. Maybe I will be, but at least I was total. I've been totally cancelled. I cannot use Twitter. I cannot use Facebook, and yet some semi-left-wing, semi-right-wing media called Reporter still calls me fascist or or whatever. After all this time, after all the facts that's showing that I am not the one trying to enforce anything upon anybody. I'm just trying to discuss and make conversations like we have now. They're still calling me a fascist. I'm not a priori against fascism if it would be defined properly. I'm against fascism as they use it. They use it as a pejorative, of course. When they call me fascist, they mean I killed small people and women or raped women or whatever they mean by
Yeah.
such terms.
Michel Foucault called it a floating signifier, which means it can be used in any situation to basically demonize anybody you don't like and stop the conversation and start up another conversation after you've been silenced. That's what it means. There are lots of people who understand that now. There are Germans who understand it. And you've got these two forces that are colliding in Germany. On the one hand, you've got this rising sense of consciousness. And on the other hand, every time the consciousness rises, it causes repression. The more consciousness rises, the more repressive the government has to become. The more repressive the government becomes, the more people realize, hey, this must be true. That's why they're repressing it. I don't know how. And now COVID has entered the equation as a way of putting an end to all discussion, an excuse to put an end to all discussion. So in Australia, which is probably the worst place in the world in this regard, they actually have concentration camps. They have concentration camps where for the unvaccinated. Wait a minute. Why are you have this is quarantine? Why are you putting people who are not sick into quarantine? That makes no sense from a medical point of view. You only put sick people in quarantine until they get over their disease and then you release them. Now you're putting healthy people in quarantine. This leads me to believe that we're not talking about medicine anymore. We are talking about the use of medicine as a form of social control and as a way of breaking down all of what is left of representative government. And so by the end, I think the end game is clear from the oligarchs' point of view. Government will now become a totally top-down operation where the politicians will enforce the edicts of the oligarchs on subject people, and that means on the entire world. That is de facto. I mean, basically, it was on its way of happening in the United States. I think that is what has happened in the European Union. It's the end of representative government.
That's why, and that's how America can have a president with an Alzheimer gone too far. You basically don't need a president anymore.
No, he's just carrying out orders from someone else. So you had the situation, a graphic representation of that is Senator Ted Cruz from Texas questioning Dr. Fauci and indicating that Dr. Fauci may have done something wrong. And at this point, Fauci just laughs at him. The idea that a senator could threaten Dr. Fauci is completely laughable. And he said, well, what about January 6th? As if to put them, do the moral reversal thing. And you're the one who's the criminal. You're the one who's the criminal because you are threatening me. This is the state of representative government right now. You would think that the senator would be more powerful than the bureaucrat, but it's completely reversed now.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard about. I don't even know her name, and I deliberately didn't look up about it. There's a member of European Commission that proposed that the name Mary wouldn't be used anymore in public conversations and in Europe at all, and that name Christmas should be banned and so forth, or something like that. And this is a topic that mainstream right-wingers and so-called Christian parties debate now or thematize right now. And although I think that all the mainstream right-wing parties are puppets of the globalists and so forth, and I do think that these topics come up only to antagonize people and to get some naive Christians or right-wingers to vote for them after all they did last 2 years. What do you think about this?
Well, we had something similar here. In 2004, Bill O'Reilly was a popular pundit on Fox News. And in December of 2004, he announced that there was a war on Christmas. War on Christmas. Okay. And it had been simmering before, and then it got kind of big. And all conservatives were all now talking about the war on Christmas. 1 week later, Pat Buchanan talked about it, and everybody was kind of getting energized. Yeah, this is not right, blah, blah, blah. But then you have to get down to the fact of, well, who's waging the war? Well, it was secularists. That's what Bill O'Reilly said. Secularists? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by secularists? Can I look these people up in a phone book? Can you give me their names? Well, no, you can't, because it's a category of your mind. And the whole point of conservatism is to create categories of the mind that don't deal with the real issue. So it was about 5 years later, suddenly David Duke comes up and says, well, no, it's not secularists, it's Jews. Basically, the Jews have always been against Christmas from the very beginning. And once you say that, well, then you're no longer fit for polite company. But the problem is, if you don't say that, you're going to lose the battle, and that's precisely what happened. So in the initial run up to this thing, Bill O'Reilly said, "Yeah, these people are the people who are promoting gay marriage, and they're promoting women in the military and all this other type of stuff, and the people won't allow it." Well, there was no resistance. We have gay marriage now. We got all of those things, and I think the main reason is because you couldn't identify the enemy. You couldn't identify the enemy. You couldn't say these are the people who are responsible for it. That changed with Santa Inc. Okay, nobody said this. Nobody said that this was a Jewish assault on Christmas. Nobody said that, but everybody knew it. Everybody knew it. As soon as you say Sarah Silverman, then they go through the list. Virtually every single person associated with that series on HBO was Jewish. And suddenly it starts to make sense. And once they establish that film, that series is going to lose money. You can't go this way anymore because consciousness has made people aware of who the real actors are. Now, that's dangerous for you to a certain extent. If you identify them, you may get punished. But the fact of the matter is that the movie failed. The people didn't fail. The movie failed. It got like a 1% approval rating. It's going to bomb. Everybody hates it. Okay. Well, that's something they have to take note of. No one told them to do that. No one had the power to stop it, but everybody now has the power to understand who's doing it and talking about the real people who are doing it. And that's a setback for them. That's significant.
These were two interesting commenters. I wanted to ask you about your opinion about it. So Ahorn says if the U.S. military in Western Europe will not help Ukraine threatened by Russian invasion, it will not help Poland and the Baltic states in the event of war. Poland and Russia, from the point of view of an American Catholic intellectual aware of all those things we've been talking about for last half an hour and in many of our streams. On one hand, Poland and Russia are some kind of enemies because of the history of the Soviet Union and Poland. On the other hand, we have this American narrative that is always against Russia, whatever happens in the world. Russia should not take over Crimea. Russia should not promote Lukashenko's ideas. Russia should do that. Russia should not do nothing at all. What's your stance about Putin and Russia and Poland and all this messed up narratives that circle around these two countries?
The Achilles heel of Poland is Russophobia. There's just no way to get around it. Now, it's easy for me to say I'm an American. The Poles have had their history. They're always in the middle between Prussia on the one hand and Russia on the other. Poland was partitioned by those people. Prussia, Russia, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire obliterated Poland. So I know their history, but it doesn't change the fact that they're in a bad situation because of that. So I'm in Poland. I'm doing the book tour for the Polish translation of Libido Dominandi. We're traveling around. I have the support of the Catholic hierarchy, and we are doing really well. Okay, big crowds wherever I go. Months later, someone wrote to me when I was in Argentina and said, between you and the bishops, you destroyed gay marriage in Poland. That's the recipe for success. So I'm in Krakow, and I sit down with a Polish member of the European Union. And I said, The real issue here is, it's great that you have this cultural resistance to gender ideology, but you got to get over this Russophobia. He put down his fork. We're eating lunch. Put down the fork. He looked at me. And there was a pause. He didn't say anything. And then I said something about Putin. At this sound, puts down his fork and walks out. Okay, the food is still there on his plate. He left without finishing his meal because I said something positive about Putin. Well, the American intelligence knows this. They know about this Russophobia, and they're exploiting it. And this is the main cause of weakness in Poland right now. They have to be able to steer an independent course, and their Russophobia is preventing this. It's no different than in Estonia. Estonia is a much worse situation than Poland. It's a much smaller country, and thanks to Stalin, they have a huge Russian minority in Estonia that will not assimilate. I mean, part of the problem is the Estonian language. How many people speak Estonian? And the Estonians have every right to insist that the people who go there learn their language. That's part of what going there is. Well, the Russians aren't going to do it, and the Estonians are now stuck in, what are we going to do? I know. We'll join NATO. Well, that was a stupid move on their part, because now you're antagonizing a group of people who will run over your country. It won't even be a speed bump. They will just roll over Estonia with basically no resistance, because the United States of America is not going to die for Estonia. They're not going to do it. The same thing is true of the Ukraine and this manufactured crisis now. There may be a war. It looks as if Russia is getting ready for a war. This is completely unnecessary. It was created by the United States, by Jews, neocons like Victoria Nuland, who were trying to expand into NATO and crush Russia, completely break it apart, as if the equivalent would be if the Russians showed up and tried to take Texas away, or the Mexicans show up and try to take Texas away from the United States of America. That's what's going on there right now. It's not going to work. And the Poles need to wake up to this fact. Whether they do or not, that's another question.
Let's discuss a little bit about this claim and try to make a distinction. On one hand, there's all this false and evil narratives coming from CIA and America and the elves about the Russia. On the other hand, there's Putin. I don't know if this is true. Maybe Putin's mother is Jewish. Most Russian oligarchs are of Jewish descent. Maybe this is all true, but what does that mean? What does that entail? Well, if it's true?
First of all, we have to go back to the opportunity that the United States of America had when basically Russia ended the Cold War. That was a great opportunity for the United States of America. And what did the United States do? Or let's be more specific. What did Jeffrey Sachs do? Who is Jeffrey Sachs? He is the Jew who represents the oligarch financial interests. He shows up in Russia as the advisor to Boris Yeltsin, whose job is to stay drunk while in office so that Sachs and the Jewish oligarchs can loot the country. Okay, that was a reality. And Russia almost died. They were losing population. It was a catastrophe for Russia. And at that point, Putin stepped in and made an arrangement. Now, he had to make an arrangement with the oligarchs. And basically, he tried to say, tame the oligarchs. Some of the Jews, 7 of the 8 oligarchs were Jews. Okay, basically, Jeffrey Sachs had engineered the transfer of Russian wealth into the hands of 8 rich Jews, who then transferred it to Wall Street. And it was a huge looting operation. Okay, Putin put a stop to that. The oligarchs either had to accept him as the ruler or they had to leave. And some left and some accepted him, but he didn't put an end to it completely. this is, in many ways, it's like the classic politician who has to deal with short-term issues and doesn't deal with the underlying problem. That's the situation that he's in. And in a way, he tried to get along, and in a way, the problems still continue to the point where it looks as if we're on the brink of war because you didn't solve that problem. That's the issue. So, I mean, yeah, it's messy. I think Putin should have made other decisions, but he did save the country from where it was heading under Boris Yeltsin. So we got to give him credit for that.
I'm trying to play devil's advocate here because I'm obviously not a fool and a naive that would believe American or elf narratives about Putin and Russia. But that said, could it okay? We can give Putin a credit if we compare him to Yeltsin, but could it be that he is, as someone commented just a moment, someone said that he's a similar white hat as Trump, although he lasted he's still lasting. He's still been lasting for 10, 20 years now. Could it be that he's a similar white hat as Trump was for America?
I think there's basis for comparison. I think you could. Trump was a nationalist. He antagonized the globalist elites. I think that's true. I think that Putin, as I described, was in some sense representing national interest. But both of these men felt that they had to make deals with the Jews in order to survive. Maybe I think Yeltsin got a better deal than Trump. Trump turned out to be totally in the pocket of the Jews, who turned on him anyway. So I think it's a fair comparison. Yeah.
Lately I became a member of a certain party in Slovenia, and I said if I ever came into politics, if I ever came into parliament, to be able to experience what you have to go through as a politician in charge, for example, I said that if I would have seen that there's no possibility at all to be sovereign without making deals with globalists and the elves, that I would immediately step down as a politician in charge, and I would tell my people, turn off all the lights. It's impossible. We're not sovereign anymore. If it's of their will, we will perish in a couple of years, and that will be all. This is what I said. This is how I think. But am I naive? We need people that know all this stuff we've been talking about till now, and yet are prepared to make deals with with elves and the globalists. What do you think? Am I naive? Am I a naive guy?
Let's be honest. Slovenia is not the United States of America. You're a small country. Are you big enough to create an army that's going to march into Austria and Germany and take it over? No, that's not going to happen. But can you work? Is it possible to work out some type of deal, some type of legitimate deal that allows us some type of ethnic autonomy? That should certainly be possible. What's the main bar? What's the main attack on ethnic autonomy and local representation right now? It's COVID. It's COVID. And the question, the point here is, are these people, the states now in the United States of America, look, they do not have an identity as strong as the Slovenian people. I guarantee you that. But the states are now having to line up with the people to defend them against COVID. You would have to put this proposition to the people and say, look, can we have enough autonomy so that we can make decisions about our own health on our own without this being forced on us? Can you convince the Slovenian people? It probably could that this is not medicine. This is basically social control, and that therefore it's impermissible. And then present that to some. Is there a reasonable alliance here for countries like Slovenia? You would think that the European Union should allow this type of autonomy, while at the same time being part of a bigger entity from which we can all prosper. But the course of events has gone in the opposite direction. It turns out that the European Union is totally tyrannical. It's more tyrannical than any predecessor in Europe that I can think of. It's certainly more tyrannical than the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They would have never interfered with your life this way. And yet here we have the European Union putting rules on you that no one has a right to impose.
Rafael Ramirez wrote, "Never compromise with else." From the point of view of Slovenia, a small country doesn't have a military power or a military at all. What can we do? What should we do? Is it, for example, this is my opinion. Again, I could be naive. Why do we need our government at all if our government's being governed by other governors from abroad? We could just have the government from abroad, and these people that are called politicians, they can just go work in a lager the same way I work right now.
You're absolutely right. If the Slovenian government does not represent the Slovenian people, it has no reason to exist. You have to make that clear to the politicians when you have these elections. It's a very simple question. Who do you work for? Do you work for the oligarchs or do you work for the Slovenian people? Which is it? You can't have it both ways. And this should be enough to, the consciousness should be spreading now. The COVID will make this apparent to people in a way that it wasn't apparent before. I think that's the benefit of COVID. Now the iron fist is becoming apparent under the velvet glove. That was not apparent as it is now. So now the people have to make some type of choice, and you've got to propose that to them with a coherent explanation. And in order to do this, we have to be able to talk about Jewish influence, because that controls Germany. They are living according to the narrative that was created after World War II. The Catholic Church is functioning according to the narrative that was created after World War II. That's the problem. We have to break out of this narrative and say, no, we're not going to go along with this. We're not going to give these people carte blanche to insult us, to rule us, to govern us behind the scenes, to control our politicians through their money and so on and so forth. We're aware we're not going to put up with it anymore. This consciousness has to become widespread. We have to be able to talk about it openly. And then at that point, we'll start to see the effect of that consciousness in political life.
Do you think the vaccines are harmful, or is it only about the control and money?
Well, I sent you a link. There's a Slovenian lady who's now giving a lecture in which she's saying 30% of the vaccines are placebos, 30% are to keep people under control, and 30% are to exterminate people. Now, that's an interesting thesis, because it would explain. So let's say when the Pope or Joe Biden gets vaccinated, it's a placebo, because they don't want to have him drop dead 2 days after he got his vaccine. That's never going to happen. But on the other hand, we have soccer players in Europe, 25 years old, in the peak of health, dropping dead on the field after they get vaccinated. What's that story about? So at this point, we're speculating about the things we don't know, because we don't know what they put into the vaccines, and they're not going to tell us. Pfizer said they're going to wait 55 years before they release any statistics on these vaccines. So it's obvious at this point that it's more than just medicine. But exactly what it is something we're going to have to react based on imperfect knowledge, which is fairly certain at this point. So basically, the last year, I think at this time, everyone achieved herd immunity throughout the world. All of the COVID cases were going down. And at that point, the vaccine started to kick in. And now we're starting to see places like Gibraltar, 100% vaccinated and COVID outbreak. And now as there's actually correlations, the higher the vaccination rate, the higher the COVID outbreak. And they're trying to disguise this by saying, oh, it's the Omicron variation. It used to be the Delta variation. These are all, no, it's the same thing. It's basically the same thing. And what you've done is compromise the immune system of the people who've gotten the vaccines. I think this narrative is becoming clear now. I think we can start to realize that there is some type of general acceptance now of this counter narrative that people can act on.
It seems that there have been created two groups of people everywhere around the world now. There are the ones that still believe in science and authorities, institutions, scientific institutions, and so forth, scientific representatives. And there are people that have become and are becoming increasingly suspectful or skeptical about all of this. So about scientific institutions, scientific interlocutors, scientific promoters, and so forth. About this second group, how can we even get on to live our lives in a society if such a thing exists without having any trust in those institutions anymore? And it's irreparable. It's irreparable, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about empires, I think that the Bible tells us, the book of Daniel tells us that they rise and they fall. Vico said the same thing. You know, it's a natural phenomenon. Everything that is natural grows, reaches a point of its height, and then it declines. And I think that's what we're seeing with the American empire right now. The question is, are we going to be able to have some type of peaceful transition to a post American empire world, or is it going to be violent? And I think that Mr. Lavrov is saying there's a real danger of war here. I mean, a real danger now of war in Europe after all of these years of peace, because these people are simply pressing too far. They're determined to hold on to their advantage, even if it means, you know, holding on to the steering wheel as they drive the car off the cliff.
Okay. Last question basically about the latest race baiting in America. Although I suspect that all this has been a show trying to antagonize the people with two kinds of actors playing their roles. For example, mainstream conservative, mainstream progressives. Ones are for blacks and the others are for whites. Not telling that. What do you think? What's your opinion about the Rittenhouse case and all the other cases of that turn into race baiting between the two mainstream political forces? I made a joke before we started the stream that there were so many Germans involved, German elves involved in the Rittenhouse case, and I read somewhere that many Americans, progressive leftists that read only New York Times, Washington Post, and so forth, that they believe that Rittenhouse killed 3 or 2 black people. and he basically killed 3 Germans. What's your opinion about it?
I think the Rittenhouse verdict was a vindication of the American judicial system. There was a lynch mob. The media had created a lynch mob that was going to go after, that wanted him convicted. And you could see they're basically standing out the courthouse, hanging with a noose, ready to hang this guy. And the judge stood up to that pressure and ensured that there was a fair trial, and he got acquitted in spite of all the media pressure. That's the type of resistance that has to take place if the system is going to survive. That's the type of, it's going to come down to one courageous man who is willing to stand up for justice, which is based on the moral law. The opposite, I think, is happening now with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. This judge is a Jewish lesbian. It's like the Attorney General of Michigan, another Jewish lesbian. Okay. Now, why am I saying this? Other than, isn't this a sign that I'm an awful bigot? Well, let's just focus on the lesbian part. I just said that judge in the Rittenhouse case had to stand up for justice, and he had to have and understand that justice is based on the moral law. If you're a lesbian, you are in active rebellion against the moral law. Okay, you were appointed to be a judge because you were a lesbian, because you are in active rebellion against the moral law, which means you will not have the moral fiber to stand up against pressure. That's the problem. That trial is going to be a cover up of powerful people. Nothing is going to happen to the powerful people who were involved with the Jeffrey Epstein, Lolita Express exploitation of underage girls. Nothing's going to happen because that judge is not going to stand up for justice. That's the fundamental issue right now in our legal system. It was vindicated in the Rittenhouse case, and the question is, how many other people have the courage of that judge to stand up against basically mob violence?
Okay, Dr. Jones, any final thoughts? What are the prospects of for us for unvaccinated and
at this point, I have to say that the prospects are better for us in the United States than they are for you in Slovenia. It looks that way. There's resistance here. I know there are people on the streets in Europe. I've seen the demonstrations, but again, you're talking about people who do not act out of their own free will. They do not have they're not acting for the good of the people. They are agents of the oligarchs who see their job as imposing oligarchic rule on subject people. That's the situation in Germany. And I think that the Germans, because they have hegemony over the European Union, are going to try to impose that on everyone else over there.
Yeah, I agree. You in Slovenia, there were some. There are always this people protesting and so forth. But I firmly believe, although I could be wrong, that all these people are basically bought from the government, becoming money from the globalists to protest as to show people how exotic it is to protest, because in Slovenia the protests the first year from Corona and have been were made by this leftist weirdos, progressives, basically driving their bicycles and so when a normal person sees this weirdos thinks, okay, this is not for me, protesting is not for me, maybe it's better to listen to government sounds more reasonable than this leftist weirdos. Ergo, we're going to get vaccinated. I firmly believe that this works this way, and even in this year, some new characters, some new people that are supposedly organizers of the protests have been promoted, and even these people seem to be fake. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I'm not sure.
Well,
It's certainly not achieving anything.
that's been the CIA playbook ever since Tehran in 1953. I think the most recent example, if you followed it, was the Solomon Islands. Did you know there was a coup in the Solomon Islands? And basically, I thought, oh, wait a minute, what's that all about? Well, it turns out that the government of the Solomon Islands recognized China over Taiwan, and this antagonized the United States, and they got their proxy warriors, namely the Australians, to go in and invade the country. But it began with a protest, and wait a minute, what do I see in the protest there in the Solomon Islands? The Israeli flag. It was orchestrated by Christian Zionists. It's obvious, okay? So obviously that's a problem.
Obviously, a problem. This is the one last question I wanted to ask you. I saw a documentary about this is in the context of asking you about how to deal with people that would listen to you and say something like, "Not all elves," or "How can you stereotype like this? Not all elves are doing this. Not all elves think like this." And so I watched this documentary about the soccer club called Beitar Jerusalem, from Jerusalem, that was supposedly a most nationalistic, racist Israel club in Israel, a Jewish club in Israel. They're like 100 years old, never had any Muslims in their as their players, and their supposed fan is Bibi Netanyahu. And in 2012, they suddenly became two Muslim players to their teams, and the fans went mad and tried to make some mess, and nothing basically happened. Although Bibi Netanyahu was in charge of Israel back then, and in 2018, a Muslim prince or something bought their most nationalistic and racist club, and Bibi Netanyahu didn't do anything. What I'm trying to say is, are they trying to antagonize their own people too, or they just don't mind, or is this also? Yeah,
I have a better example. Let's go back to Pfizer. Pfizer is run by a Jew. The Israelis, if this vaccine is what I'm saying is, it's biowarfare. Does this mean the Jews, Borla is waging biological warfare against the Israelis? Is that what's going on here? It could be. It wouldn't be the first time that big Jews have offered up little Jews on the altar of the Jewish people. The Lavon affair is one example where the Israelis actually murdered other Jews to spread panic through the population so they would emigrate to Israel. It's distinctly possible. You have to make a distinction between the Jewish people and individual Jews. The Jewish people is a political entity that operates according to principles of big and powerful Jews, who then use other Jews, little Jews. They terrorize them into being human shields and proxy warriors for their agenda. So just because you can find one Jew who believes X or Y doesn't mean that the Jewish people that he has any control over the people who speak in his name. That's clear. Norman Finkelstein talked about the Holocaust payments. Who benefits from the Holocaust payments? His parents were in a camp. They never got a nickel, as far as I know. And all that money went to fund the agenda, the shakedown of the German people for the benefit of the big Jews who run the organizations and keep this industry in motion.
So it's basically secular ethnic rich Jews. Could we
I,
say,
I think if you're
is this the
talking
proper
about,
stereotype?
I like to say big Jews and little Jews. That's what I like to say. I mean, whether they're secular or not, secularism is a code word for people who are afraid to say the word Jew, I think. I think all Jews are in rebellion against Logos in one way or the other, including the Orthodox Jews who follow the Talmud. But as I said, when I was in Iran, they had a rabbi there from Neder Karta. I said, look, if all Jews were like Rabbi David here, we wouldn't have a problem, because those Jews are content to live off in their ghettos and just be what they want to be all by themselves. That's not the way the Jewish people act in America. If you let them in, they take over. They took over our foreign policy. They are running the country in their interest and not the interest of American people. That's got to stop. It's going to stop one way or the other. I'm trying to have some type of peaceful solution. If they keep pressing this agenda, there will be violence. A peaceful solution in some sense, like what just happened with Santa Inc., where the people simply rejected this assault on Christmas by exposing the people who are behind it. That's the type of thing that should be happening. YouTube should be happy to provide a platform for that. But if they don't, that's their problem. This consciousness is not going to go backwards.
Do you think an actor? This is a call for speculation, but it's funny, and I have to ask you: do you think an actor like Seth Rogen, do you think he's aware of what just happened to him after that tweet and after this show, or is he just a dumb motherfucker that still believes, even after that, believes that all these people that tried to tell him the truth are basically white supremacists?
Well, look, as soon as you say white supremacist, my inclination is to say you're lying to yourself, because you produced a crappy movie that everybody hates, and everybody understood exactly what you were doing, and you were caught red-handed doing it, and now you're trying to escape by blaming it on some type of imaginary group of people. So yeah, I think Seth Rogen knows what happened, and he's got to lie to you to let himself off the hook.
Okay, Dr. Jones, thank you very much for your time, for your sincerity, and for your intelligence and for your intelligent commentaries. I hope we will meet again sooner than we did now. It's been too much time, and I have to thank all the viewers for all the commentaries. Thank you very much to all, and good night for Europeans and Slovenes, and good afternoon for Americans to America.
Thank you, Alice. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure for me. Thank you.